Hey you, and welcome. In this video, we will be committing, branching out, and merging the branches back into the master branch of GitHub using our GitHub desktop that we have installed. So let's dive right into it. I have the GitHub desktop open, and we had cloned a repository called test API in the previous video, and we're going to continue working with that. Now notice in the GitHub desktop, I have the options to open the code in VS Code, or show in Finder, or view on GitHub. So just because GitHub and VS Code are both owned by Microsoft, it's very easy, they're integrated. So I can just click on Open VS Code and it will just do that for me. So let's do that first. Great, I'm gonna zoom in a little. All right, so as you can see, the repo is empty, and on the GitHub desktop, if I go back to that, it is waiting for some changes, local changes. There are no local changes right now. So let's make a local change. And in order to do that, I do want to have the terminal open because I do want to make this into a node application. So let's open our terminal. I'll use my iTerm here. Perfect. With that zoomed in, I can run commands. I have to make sure I'm in the right directory. And if I remember correctly, I had the GitHub folder in my documents folder. And then, oh, it's asking me for permission. Great. GitHub folder, then test API folder, then we have no files inside it. So that's the folder structure that I want to go to. Remember, I press tab to get code to automatically give me IntelliSense here. Since there is no other directory in GitHub right now, if I press tab, it auto completes it for me and says, you're probably trying to go into test API. That's the only folder left in here. So I press tab to do that. All right, I'm going to press enter, and that should take me directly inside the test API. And you can see now that there is a main branch, and that is coming from GitHub. So our iTerm is integrated with our GitHub repo as well. So what I'll do here is npm init y and -y. That should start my npm project for me with a package JSON. Let's go back to VS Code and let's see how it looks. So yeah, there is a package JSON. The name is called test API. And if I go back to my GitHub desktop, there should be some changes. There we go. It's telling me that there is currently a change for package JSON. You have added these lines. This is plus sign, so that means they're added. Green also means added. And I can save these changes. Now I have saved them locally, but if I go to my Firefox, that's where I have GitHub open. If I refresh this page, me changing that file locally didn't really do anything. The reason for that is because we haven't committed and pushed the changes. So there's two steps to it. We have to commit first, and then we have to push the changes for others to see on GitHub. So how do we do that? We go back to GitHub desktop, and first things first, at the bottom, we will say there's a, in this case, great. It actually is smart enough to know that I created package JSON. So I can just say create package JSON. That's pretty cool. And description, you don't really have to provide that. If you want to, let's go right ahead. And I'll just say commit to main. Main is the only branch in our GitHub repo at the moment. So that's the one that it's going to go to. So I'll go ahead and commit. Perfect. With the commit done, now I can push these changes. So even at this point, if I go back to the browser and just refresh, no changes have made their way to GitHub because I haven't pushed them. So let's go back to GitHub desktop and click on publish branch. And you can see there's loading up top. And once that is done, no more local changes are reporting in the GitHub desktop. And if I go back to the Firefox browser, refresh my page, I can see that there is now a package JSON. So we have successfully created our first commit, and we have pushed the changes as well. Let's do more with it. I do want to create an application out of it, and I want to use GitHub branches to make that feature happen. So first things first, let's create a branch. I go back to GitHub desktop, and to create a branch, I would go into current branch section at the top and click on new branch, and it will ask me for a name. And in this case, I will name it develop. So this is my develop branch. This is where I will be developing mostly, and then I'll merge it back into main when I want to. So I'll go ahead and create branch. With that branch created, if I go back to GitHub in Firefox, if I refresh my page, nothing has changed. If I go to the branches section on the top left, there's no develop branch because we haven't pushed that branch yet. So every time you make changes locally, there are local changes, and then you have to push them to cloud for github.com to pick up on those. So I'll go back to GitHub Desktop and click on Publish Branch. No changes are reported, so it's the exact same copy of the main branch. We're just calling it develop. Publish, and there we go, loading happened. And I can go back to, we'll come back to pull request in a bit. I'm not going to talk about this just yet. Let's go back to Firefox, refresh the page, and we can see that there's now a develop branch in the branch dropdown. And if I switch between the two, I click on develop, there are no changes. Package.json is still there, and for main, package.json is still there, and the changes were made 2 minutes ago. So nothing much has changed. Let's start building our application based on develop branch. So first things first, you have to always make sure you're on the right branch. Even experienced developers make a mistake with that. So I'll go back to GitHub Desktop and make sure in the current branch I have develop selected, not the main. And with that selected, I can go back to my VS Code and start making changes to this application. First thing I'll do is create a new file, call it index.js, and I'll put a function in there, call it sum. You can write any code really. And yeah, it just does nothing. Let's say it does console log of some sort, hello, and it just calls itself. As soon as the file is called, it just called itself, sum. Save that. Now with that changes there, I can go back to GitHub Desktop, and I can see now that there is an index.js file that was created, and that has this code with the function and the console log. And I can commit this as well, so I can say create index.js, no description, commit to develop, and push origin. Loading is done. Now if I go back to Firefox, reload my page, I can see that the main branch does not have index.js that we have just pushed. However, if I go to develop, the index.js file is there. So you can see how branches allow you to copy your code, and some code can be different from the other, and then we have to push it back or merge it back into the main branch when we're ready for it. We're not just ready yet. I do want to make one more change. So let's go back to VS Code in package.json under scripts. Let me hide the file explorer. In these scripts, I want to write a start script, and the start script is just going to node index.js. So it's just going to run the index.js using node server. I'll go ahead and save that. And if I go back to my GitHub, let's see how that looks, GitHub Desktop, sorry. You can see that there's a package.json change waiting for you to commit and push. And the change is that we took away the test script. We created a start script on line number 7. And on line number 20, there is a line break. I believe it's because of my VS Code. It just removed some lines. That's just the editor thing. So I'll go ahead and update package.json. That's the message. You can write anything here. Doesn't really have to be something meaningful. As long as it's meaningful to you and you're going to explain what you did. This is just for you to keep notes of every time you make changes. And it doesn't just have to be one file. So let me just go back to code and let's make another change. In index.js, I'll just add another change. Let's take a variable argument A and argument B, and let's do A plus B. So there's some changes on an existing file. Let's see how that looks in GitHub Desktop. And you can see that there's also index.js changes now. And that's also just showing that some lines were deleted, some lines were added, but actually it's just a few things were changed, but it just counted as a whole new line. With that done, a summary required. It doesn't just know, because there's not just one file, it doesn't really know what message you should type. So in this case, I'll just say updated code and added script. All right, something meaningful for you to remember what the commit was about. So I'll go ahead and commit to develop, push origin, loading finishes, and I go back to my Firefox and refresh my page. And I should see the same files, but if I go into package.json at this moment, the script says start. And if I go back to the repo and click on main branch and look at the package.json, script is test. So you get the idea, is just develop branch is the one we're working on right now. So how do we make it so that main branch gets this new code now? Well, there's two ways to do it. One way to do it is locally, where we can just merge the branches together, or the other way would be to do it so that many developers can collaborate on that and make comments on what your changes were. They can see the difference between the code and make an informed decision whether it should go to the main branch or not. So I think letter sounds more fun. So that's the one we're going to work with. We're going to create a pull request. So you would hear some developers say, create a PR for this, I'll look into it, or create a pull request. That's what they mean. PR is just a short form for pull request. So if I go back to github.com, of course you could make it from GitHub desktop, but I just feel more comfortable doing it from pull request in github.com. And they have a very good UI for that. So that's the one I'm going to use. So click on pull request. I'll click on new pull request button. And there's a base branch and a compare branch. Base branch is the branch where the changes are going to go into, which in this case will be main. And the compare branch is going to be the one where the changes are, in this case, develop branch. And as you can see, as soon as I select that, it shows me a few. We can see the commits that took place ever since the main branch and the develop branch parted ways. So in this case, index was created and updated code on index and also added a script. Those two changes happen. And underneath it, I can see all the files that changed. And you can see all the changes. So that way you can make an informed decision. So I'll go ahead and create this pull request. And I'll make a note. I'll say develop merging to main. You could provide description here as well. I will not do so at the moment. And I'll just go ahead and create a pull request. Perfect. With this pull request created, now other developers that are looking at the repo, they can see this in the pull request section of GitHub and they can make an informed decision. There is a section for reviewers. If you are working with many developers, you would see other developers' name here and you can ask somebody else to review your code and they can provide a yes or no, or they can even comment on particular lines. So let me show you how that works. If I go over to the files change section of the pull request, that's where I can see all the files on the left hand side and the file changes on the right hand side. And let's say I'm not liking this particular line altogether, this console log. I don't want you to console log. So I'll click on this plus sign and it'll allow me to write a comment about this. So in this comment, I will say, I don't like this console log. Very friendly comment. So I'll go ahead and say start review, or I can say just one comment. So you can do either or. In this case, I'll just say one comment because I'm not really reviewing the code. I'm just commenting on one line. You can still merge the code. It's just that I just don't like it. It's my personal opinion. I'll go ahead and add single comment. And I can see that comment has been registered. If I go back to my PR conversation, so my pull request conversation, at the bottom, you can see that there is a comment made by me a moment ago. And it's on index.js file. It gives you a snippet of the code that I'm talking about, and it says this is the comment that the person wrote. And you can of course generate a conversation out of this. You can talk to each other, and when you reach a resolution, click on resolve conversation and a conversation gets resolved. So that's how pull requests work, is that collaboration is very important in developer community. So when you write some code, it's best to just create a pull request, get a few of your friends to look over and see if they have any comments about your coding style or something that they would say would optimize your code or would make it look better. This is the place to do it. Once you're ready to commit your code, committing the code. Once you're ready to do so, you can click on merge pull request button at the bottom left. And it will ask you, are you sure you want to commit? And the commit message will be merge pull request number 1. This is the first pull request ever created on this repo from Zimzim Develop. So that's the branch name. And I'll go ahead and merge that. Perfect. After the merge has happened, chances are you want to delete the branch because there is no use for it anymore. So you can click on delete branch. If you want to keep it, that's okay as well. Most likely you will go ahead and delete the branch. But you don't delete the history of the code. If you go back to code in github.com, I'm still on the web UI. I can see that now main branch has the index.js and package.json. And if I click on package.json, it has the new script that I wrote. So all the changes that were in develop now made their way to main. All right, that's how branches work in GitHub. I'll see you all in the next video.